Hello and welcome to the Wicked Things podcast. The tales found in this group are short stories not connected to any other. So we grouped them up and made a playlist out of them. The first story here is called Camp. Originally called I Hate Camp, but later shortened to simply Camp. The story follows a young man living a troubled life. He discovers, in this alternate world from our own, there are consequences for your actions. Our main character finds himself sent to a re-education camp for troubled youth. This story should shock you and cause you to cringe.
I am no novice at causing people grief, and I enjoy the chaos I create, but they went too far. It all started when I got suspended on my last days before summer at Nordstrom Middle School. The world is so oversensitive these days. I was sent to the principal's office for acting like my hand was a gun. The principal sent me home with a letter to my parents. In the letter, the principal demanded that I see a counselor, as I needed to be more sensitive to others. My parents took me to the counselor they recommended. She did not like our conversation. Afterwards, she had several late-night meetings with my parents. She recommended that I be sent to a special camp. My parents told me how this was good for me. I reluctantly agreed. I should have realized something was wrong when my parents started filling out all those forms. There were so many forms, but the ones they were most excited to get their hands on were the insurance forms. They took me to the doctor right away for a complete physical. I am in great condition. I play soccer and take taekwondo. So there were no problems there with my health, and the doctor filled out his part of the forms. My parents sent the forms in. I had never seen them so excited. The day came to be picked up for camp. I was surprised when the bus showed up looking like something out of a post-apocalyptic nightmare. The whole thing was dark blue with thick wire mesh secured to the outside of the windows. It stopped in front of my house, and the door opened. 6 huge guys in cargo shorts and polo shirts, the camp counselors, I guess, rushed to meet my parents. From behind the wall of counselors, a boy about my age stepped out and greeted my parents. They all smiled and laughed. My parents motioned for me to come outside, and I did. It was completely surreal. My parents handed them the papers, and they led me onto the bus like a cow to the slaughter. I tried to resist, but they had me down and on the bus and in my seat. I looked out my window as my parents and that boy walked into our house. I yelled, "What the hell's going on?" I felt something pierce the side of my neck, and then darkness. I awoke covered in sweat and lying on a moldy cot in a termite-riddled wooden shed. I was no longer bound or gagged. I stood and walked to the door. It was locked. I looked between the planks and saw only forest surrounding me. I rattled the door, and heavy footsteps followed. I was knocked down as the door burst inward and struck my head. He was huge and wore military tactical clothes. His face was covered, but I could clearly make out his commands. "Outside, now!" He only had to say it once. I staggered outside, motivated by his repeated pushes. I looked around, kids all over the place just like me. Each child followed one of the black-clad stormtroopers. They gathered us all in the center of a clearing. In the middle of the clearing was a tall wooded pole with a speaker that stood in the middle of us.
"Good afternoon, children,"
announced the speaker. We looked around at each other, confusion wore heavy on each of our faces. A boy yelled out and collapsed to the ground. A wound tunneled through his head, and it gave me a clear view of his attacker. I stood coated in everything from between his ears. Everyone froze in terror as the stormtroopers held us at gunpoint.
"You are here because you've been deemed unworthy to remain in polite society by your families and peers, and you have been selected for removal and re-education."
We stood in shock as each question resulted in a culling of our herd by our black-clad shepherds.
Now, if there are no more questions, we will begin with learning to respect those in positions of authority.
I hate camp.
Cringeworthy, right? The kid went through all this because he made his hand in the shape of a gun and a teacher witnessed it. I guess this could be a tale of warning as cultural sensitivity grows more out of control. Until next time, this is the Wicked Things Podcast signing off.